Hey there. Really excited to share with you some thoughts on why facilitation is the future. And I would first like to ask you to raise your hand, say hi, leave a comment in the chats. If I see you there in the chats, um, I can add you to the stream. I'd love to see who is here, who's listening in, and be able to chat and engage with you. So take a moment to just to say who you are, say hi, and I'll make sure to loop you in. Really excited to speak with all of you today about the future of facilitation. And facilitation's always mattered, and I really want to be clear about that. It's always mattered, and it's always been important to bring together people that you're working with and that you are needing to accomplish things. Hey, Adriano, great to see you. Thanks for saying hi, and thanks for listening in. And the thing is facilitation has always been important, right? And we need to keep in mind that it's going to be more and more important in the workplace as we continue to face more frequent change. The rate of change continues to increase, and I mean, if COVID is just one example, right? The onslaught of technology and AI is going to continue that curve. And look, we got Therese here from Sweden. So great to have you. Thanks for listening in. And the thing I'll say is with this extra technology, and with things advancing at rates that we can't even understand, I think we're going to see even more need as organizations shift. And there's some folks in the organization that will become more technical. There are others that will need to rely on the soft skills and bring out the humanity in the work that we do. What is it that humans can uniquely bring to the situation that algorithms and the technology cannot? And facilitators will lead the charge on these things. And even before we get to that extreme, we'll see more and more complexity and more issues that we have to creatively adapt to. And we're going to find that organizations will notice that in order to outpace this growing snowball of technology and complexity, that we need to be highly adaptive. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. We can embrace it, right? And I think one of the biggest shifts in culture is going to be around the shift away from hierarchical leadership. Okay, and there's been a lot of experiments, whether it's holacracy or what have you. I think a lot of these systems are still in their early days, and when you look at the problems with a lot of these systems is people who adopt them will generally revert back after about a couple of years. And one of the main problems is decision making and how we come to make decisions that maybe we hadn't anticipated. So what are these frameworks, and how does this governance model adapt with us? How do we make sure the governance model can ensure that it is resilient to change, so that as we're learning new things, we're able to respond and we're able to adapt to those needs? It's really, really, really critical. So when we think about hierarchical structures and why they're not going to serve us, that can be the inspiration and the voice that we can kind of keep clear in our minds as we think about how we plan and adapt for the futures, rather than just coming in and adapting some methodology we maybe read about, or we heard Zappos did this thing and let's just go do that. I think it's really about being conscious of the changing landscape, how we respond to that, and what that means for us in our culture, and how we create a resilient structure so that we can continue to adapt and continue to learn. It's those mindsets that will serve us, not specific tactics. And so I want to talk a little bit about what hierarchical leadership and what it does, where it doesn't serve us. And I will say that the alternative is facilitated leadership. I just want to pause there for a moment before I go into the issues with hierarchical leadership, and just think about for a moment facilitated leadership. And really, this is the future, right? This being able to come in as a unbiased party that can help move and shape and sculpt where the conversation goes and where the future of this organization, this group of people can go. This is kind of what we're talking about. So these distributed groups can be brought together, galvanized, made resilient through great facilitated techniques. And so what we're trying to avoid, why are these hierarchical structures so detrimental, or what issues might they cause? So, constant supervision and lack of opportunity to take ownership over a project can feel oppressive. So teams may not feel truly autonomous. Clearly, we think and consider micromanaging to be bad, but often hierarchical structures generates the same sentiments, whether we are micromanaging or not. Utilizing the room intelligence is near impossible. Like, how do we truly tap in to what's surfacing, what's happening, if we can't reteam, if we can't restructure, if we can't find new governance models because we have to fit into the structure? If you've ever heard the terms, that's not the way things are done around here, it's probably because you're leaning in on this notion of the structure. What is the structure creating that we can't get free of? And so we often talk about the importance of structure, but we also had to understand that it's a continuum, and too much of it is going to be detrimental. And I think hierarchies can really limit us. There's a really interesting law called Conways law that we should consider here, which is this notion that any software will resemble this notion of, it will take on the shape, the form of the organization that built it. So that structure will have an imprint, a fingerprint on what gets built, because they are going to, just the thought patterns and how information flows, it will impact the structure. And so we're going to attack a complex problem. We have complex scenarios coming at us, but we have a complicated structure, meaning we have and most of the time, the structures are pretty simple, but those domains, those organizational kind of paradigms won't really serve us because we haven't structured in a way that allows us to be adaptive. I ran into this quite a bit in the software world, where if we're building software, then we need to think about what it is that we can support from a standpoint of continuous iteration. And so a lot of teams that want to take legacy software and apply agile principles to it really get stuck because the software is not adaptable. The software is not written in a way that we can release it every week or update it every week or make small little iterative tweaks. It's made in a way that it's like you have to kind of bolt giant things in and like do giant big step changes. And so how iterative what's the philosophy built into the architecture of this thing? And often those philosophies, those paradigms come from the way we look at the world, and the way we organize ourselves impacts the way we look at the world. And I love this comment from Adriano. So spot on. What is the minimal amount of structure to unleash collective intelligence and minimize chaos? 100%. We have to have some structure so that we can lean on that and have some understanding. But as soon as the world shifts in a way that doesn't align with how we understood the world when we made that structure, it will not serve us anymore. And so we have to be willing to creatively destruct that structure and move on. We can't hold on so tightly that we hold it sacred and we're unwilling to shift and change. And then, so maybe you don't have to be a manager to facilitate leadership or change. I think that is pretty spot on, Bill. And, I think that, facilitators can come in all shapes and sizes. I like to tell people that if you schedule a meeting, you're the facilitator. Now, as a big question of whether or not you're being a good facilitator or a horrible facilitator, and I would say if you're not intentional about it, you're probably being a bad one unless you're just inherently gifted. And there are those people out there that are. But we recommend that anyone that's scheduling a meeting, take a beat and think, I'm facilitating this meeting. How am I going to make it incredible? How will I make this meeting magical? And also another thing to think about is you can facilitate change by showing up as a great participant. How many meetings have you ever gone to where you thought to yourself, what is this meeting for? Why did they never bother telling me what this meeting's about, or like why we're together, and it seems to be going off the rails, but just quietly suffer through the meeting? Well, that's not really necessarily being a great participant. But have you ever seen participants show up and just derail things because they're pushing their own agenda? Also not great. So what is that sweet spot around supporting the work that's getting done, but also being vocal when maybe the facilitator of the meeting is not taking that role seriously, or they weren't intentional about it? And we can show up as friends of the facilitator and support them. If it seems like something that ahead of time that you're noticing, you can lean in and find out, what's the intention here? It's not very clear to me. Can you help make that clear? And if I can do anything to help make others clear, happy to do that. So I think that point around not having to be a manager is really fascinating. And, one of my favorite books on this topic is Team of Teams. And it's really about this notion of, decentralized and distributed leadership, and how General McChrystal developed some of these concepts while trying to capture bin Laden, and how the frameworks that were in place were shifting on them. I mean, they were dealing with a complex adaptive system. Once they learned some information, it wasn't true anymore because the groups were reorganizing themselves. And so they had to respond. They had to organize themselves in a way that would respond. And he had a really keen insight, which was, if you're a leader in a decentralized, fully autonomous organization, you need to think about yourself as a gardener. You don't make the plants grow. You simply plant seeds, set the initial conditions, and do what you can to remove any impediments, and let the plants do the things they do. So it's about putting people in the right situations and getting out of their way, and then being pleasantly surprised. And so I think, that's the idea here, and it's highly informed by complexity theory. So when we're looking at complex adaptive systems and things that work in those domains, these are the kinds of things we're talking about. And I believe that facilitators are really great at providing the support that's needed to make sure that we can harvest that room intelligence. Someone in the comments mentioned collective intelligence. I love that word, collective intelligence. We call it room intelligence because we're usually gathered in some kind of room. But yes, the collective. How do we harness that and really capture it and cultivate it? This is like a garden. This is our garden. The rooms, the collection, the gathering of people. As facilitators, that is our garden. And how do we tend to it? How do we cultivate it? How do we foster it? The little plant in the corner that's suffering, how do we address that? The big bush that's like shadowing out all the rest of the garden. Do we trim it back a little bit? What do we do there? How do we attend to that? How do we add support? And Adriana's point here around, inclusive collaboration, distributed, virtual. Yes, absolutely. These are the things we're talking about. So I just want to end for you with a few comments on, what does the shift to distributed leadership really looks like? Facilitated leadership, facilitated, intelligence. How do we think about like showing up in our meetings and shaping our culture to prepare for this new distributed leadership? And ultimately, it's bottoms up project management. And so when you think about teams within a group are specialists in their own work, and allowing them to do the things that they're really empowered to do. And, this really like aligns nicely with a lot of the work that you're seeing come out of the gig economy, or like the work that Open Assembly is doing around kind of open talent, right? And how can you taskify work and give people jobs that they really excel at, and that they're at the edge. It's a lot in cloud computing. When you're talking about putting computing at the edge, let's put the work at the edge. Let's put the intelligence and the nodes and let them do their work, and let's flow that in and then find a great way to harvest it back up. We want to empower people to act intelligently, and that's where that knowledge at the edge is really about. We don't want them just to be information collectors, and then someone in the case of General McChrystal, someone was in DC kind of doing all the synthesis, and by the time they did that and pumped it back out to the field, it was no longer valuable. So we want to make sure everyone's empowered to act independently, and they can't do that unless we provide it for them. And Bill says, do you have a checklist of ideas of how we can help as friends of the facilitator? Why we do, and we're including it in our book Magical Meetings. And there's a full list of things that we've captured there. And so that book, unfortunately, it's going to be a little bit that doesn't come out until February the 2nd as part of our Control the Room conference. But hope to see you at the conference. And the call for presentations is still open. So if you're interested in speaking about facilitation or anything related to what I'm talking about today, please come, because we're looking for experts to share like academic knowledge. We're looking for practitioners to share practical knowledge. We want it all. We're really interested in what people have to say. So just maybe really quickly, you can be on the lookout of the why, Bill. Like think about, did they communicate the why? Is it clear what we're going to be doing? Did they seem to like put together any arc or narrative of this thing? And if not, offer help. If there don't seem to be bringing everyone into the conversation, if the meeting doesn't seem inclusive and someone seems left out, as a participant, you can totally turn to Susan and say, hey, Susan, we'd love to hear from you too. You can be the eyes and ears for the facilitator, because sometimes they might not be noticing things. If there's nuance in the language, if you see two people disagreeing, but it sounds like they're agreeing and they think they're agreeing, and the facilitator's not picking up on that, lean in, say, Bob and Susan, what I think I hear you saying is this. I want to make sure that you're really agreeing, because it sounds like you might be disagreeing. The facilitator will highly appreciate it. If you're noticing people squirming and and you had to go to the bathroom yourself, maybe say, hey Douglas, what you're saying is really interesting, but could we take a bathroom break real quick? I think it might be about time, at least for me. Again, facilitator will appreciate all these little nudges. So, if there are things that you would do as a facilitator, and maybe don't usurp, maybe just offer that as a gift to the facilitator, because they might appreciate it, because they might just be distracted. They might not be on their game that day. They might not realize. So, just be hard on ideas, soft on people. Embody all of the advice, all of the ground rules, all of the operating agreements we usually throw out as facilitators. Embody those as a participant, and you will help your facilitator out. So, ultimately the takeaway is, trust, respect, and reliance on the capabilities of each member of the team is seen in these leadership styles. And it leads to better work and happier employees who take ownership over their work. And so, if nothing else, think about how you might be able to lean in on distributed leadership, how facilitation and inclusivity and the way we meet and the way we intentionally bring work to meetings. Let's do that. Let's do that today. And let's level up our facilitation skills, because they're going to be more and more important as the years roll on. And so we hope to see you at Control the Room conference, where we talk more and more about facilitation and all the various different modalities and methods and frameworks, and how people show up as facilitators in different ways. We want to cover it all. And so if you have something to share, please sign up for the CFP, and hope to see you at the conference. And thanks for tuning in. It's been fun chatting about facilitation. I always love, sharing ideas about how to make meetings better, because let's face it, there are too many bad meetings. And with that, I will see you again sometime, hopefully at an amazing workshop.